Hi, everybody, and welcome to FICOM's third installment of our organic growth series. I'm Meg Carpenter. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at FICOM, and it is such a privilege of mine to have Adam Cox, who is the Chief Wealth Management Officer and Executive Vice President at the First National Bank in Sioux Falls, with me today as our guest. Adam, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to see you, Meg. Thanks so much for asking me.
So we've had the privilege of working together and knowing each other for many years, and I am just consistently impressed with, first of all, you as a leader, and also with the work that the First National Bank in Sioux Falls does to achieve really remarkable organic growth. So when I was thinking about who made the best sort of fit for our third installment of our organic growth series, it was natural for me to call you and ask if you'd do this with me. So I know a lot about you and the business that you lead at the bank, but I'd love for everyone to hear to meet you and to get to know you a little bit. So tell us about the wealth management division at the bank and sort of what you're responsible for.
Yeah, so we have kind of an unusual setup as far as community banks are concerned. We have a good-sized community bank located here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, but we have a really outsized wealth management area. And a lot of that, I think, was born in part because of just our history, our roots. I like to say the chassis of our car was built on personal trust relationships. And in a community that is growing and is thriving, they need services like financial services. And we've been happy to do that. So we have a long history of providing trust services to this community. What's newer for us as a bank is offering some of the kind of the more forward-thinking things that we offer now for our investment and financial planning clients and tax planning and things like that. So that's kind of the fun stuff we've added recently, but we have had a long history of being in trust services and investment services and are now just having a lot more fun as we create new things for our clients.
So I know that your division specifically, and I want to make sure I'm using the right words. Do you say division, department? Like how do you sort of categorize
Um,
wealth?
Either way is fine. We usually say department.
Department. Okay, cool. So I know that the wealth management department at the bank has enjoyed and earned remarkable growth over the last several years. So tell me a little bit about that. I would love to hear about it from you from a numbers perspective. But then also like, what does that look like beyond the numbers?
Yeah. So over the past 8 years, we have basically doubled the size of our department from an AUM and an assets under administration standpoint. And at this point, we're blessed to add at least one new account every single business day.
Wow.
And so yeah, it's been kind of a wild ride, but we haven't doubled our staffing during that time. So I'll chunk it up. So the last 8 years, we kind of spent the first 4 to 5, I would say, taking a look at the foundation. I always like to say that you can't build a second story addition until you've corrected the foundation. And so we spent a lot of time on processes and procedures and operations and making sure we had the right things in place and the right people in place to take that next step for us. And so I would say a lot of our growth, that doubling has happened in about the last 4 years,
Mm.
which is pretty remarkable. But it just takes some time to be able to set your business up for success, and you do a lot of things that aren't necessarily glamorous or they get a lot of attention. And then when you do start to do the fun things and add the things on that clients really want, then you start to see the expectation that the growth continue to go, and you kind of look up one day and you're like, "How did this happen? How did we get here?" The expression goes, it takes many years to be an overnight success. I feel like that's our story in large part.
What are some of those unglamorous things in the first 4 years before you really felt like the growth ramped up? What were some of those specific processes, procedures, operations that you had to set in place to have that strong foundation?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's nitty gritty. I have a fantastic team, and we all just kind of hunkered down and said, we're going to review every single thing we do as a department to make sure it's the way we should be doing it, to make sure it's optimized, to systematize as much as humanly possible so we can focus more time on things we get credit for. So things that clients need and want for us to be doing, we don't get credit for how we raise cash or make a distribution or dollar cost average. Like those are things you have to do, but those are not things you get credit for. And so we had a 90-page combined process and policy manual, and we took it apart and we rewrote almost every single one of those things. We did focus groups with our teams to say, how do you do this versus how do you do this? And we came up with best practices. And then we trained and trained and trained until we had a way to really efficiently operate our business. So as an example, we have, doubled the size, but we've only probably added 5 people. So we've got 45 people on the team. We started with about 40. And so to be able to do that without doubling the amount of people that you have on your team, you have to get really smart about how you set up your firm to be able to capitalize on that growth.
That's remarkable. Adding only 5 people and doubling your AUM.
Well, some of that
Um,
too is shifting. So we got out of some business lines. So we had to make some difficult decisions early on to say, okay, there are a few business lines that we're in that we probably shouldn't be in. We either don't have the scale, we don't have the people, the expertise locally to be able to offer those things, or they're just not very profitable lines of business. And so part of that too was exiting those businesses. And so we've added people in other areas as we've added new business lines. And so net 5 probably up, but the composition of our team looks different than it did 8 years ago.
sure. So some of those services were specifically within the wealth management department or
Correct.
broadly at the bank.
Well, I would say yes, with one exception would be the bank did offer brokerage services. So we had the fiduciary, my group. Then we also had a brokerage area, and I didn't want to have that confusion inside the same bank to get people. One of the things I really wanted to do. We don't have custodial referrals like a lot of RIAs do to grow our business, but we do have the opportunity for bank referrals. So one of the things you have to solve for first off is where do those referrals go? I didn't like having people have a question in their mind of where am I supposed to send this referral? Does it go to brokerage? Does it go to wealth? And now I have to know which is which. So part of that was eliminating that as an option. And frankly, I'm a fiduciary guy, and I think that's the better model. So that's one we went with.
Oh, interesting. So I understand that piece of it, which is from a growth perspective, people often go to marketing first.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of conversations in and around the industry where we're asking questions about the business and the work that's been done in the business from all things, from the culture, the vision, to the people, the team, the tech, the processes. And it does become, in my experience, relatively clear when a firm doesn't have the strong foundation. And marketing does not fix broken businesses.
Nope.
It oftentimes just makes things worse because if you have a
Mhm.
successful marketing strategy, you're getting people, more qualified leads to come in the front door. And then we all know what happens when you don't have the ability to service them and sort of the processes, people, procedures, operations built appropriately. And so, and as you know from working with us, that's why we do a lot of work on the front end, sort of with the strategic consulting before we even get to, what are we going to be suggesting from a marketing perspective? Because we want to make sure that we're adding value and that we're adding value to businesses that are ready to receive it.
Yep.
And so I totally understand the need for that sort of strong foundation. And then once you built the strong foundation, you and your team built the strong foundation, Adam, then you really were able to turn on a pretty remarkable growth engine. And I know how passionate you are about sort of helping the community, the wealth management community at large, understand that we as an industry, we just can't count on growth. And if we're looking at the same data, I think you and I both sort of agree that look across the custodial data, they're showing that firms are roughly growing at about 3% of net new asset growth, while at the same time expenses are growing at greater than 7%. So like this is a real issue.
Yep.
And you and your team, we've never counted on it. Like I said, you've built a really impressive, scalable, repeatable, predictable growth engine. So tell us about how you've done that.
Yeah. So I think, you know, it obviously starts with some of the things we talked about as far as getting your business in a place where you can accept that growth. So once we got there, then it became, okay, we've subtracted some things from our business. Now, what things do we need to add that clients value? So we know clients value planning. They're not hiring us to just for investments anymore. Like that part of the business is certainly there, and that's a valuable part of the business. But clients are demanding more than that. So they're demanding financial planning. They want to know if they're on the right track. They want to know about taxes. I think there's an emerging gap between what people in our industry provide and what tax professionals provide. And I think it's incumbent upon us to fill that void. And so we've added tax planning as part of our services. We've also added a small account solution, which, as most people who are in this business would understand, that's not a profitable endeavor to do a small account solution, but we think it's really, really important. And it's something that was kind of on my heart is to help that next generation of clients because the options for someone with $20,000 who's just getting started off is oftentimes not an ideal option. Either they're doing it themselves or they're going to someone who's going to sell them something. And so we felt pretty passionately that we needed to have a solution for those folks. And as an aside, it has been an incredible avenue for us to grow our business from G2 and G3 clients who are older and further along. So before we would have said, no, we don't really have an option to serve you. Now we do. And so we've got a continuum of services, which is really, really powerful. And then most recently we added an ultra high net worth group to surround clients who have substantial assets and needs with the best that we can offer. And that has been incredibly additive over the past 14 or 15 months.
It's an interesting, well, I think it is. I'm curious to hear your perspective. I think it's sometimes an interesting branding conundrum when you're serving so many people. So, you've got from the new ultra high net worth services that you're offering all the way down to younger investors with your small account solution and everything in between, sort of with what I would imagine to be sort of your bread and butter, wealth management clients. So how are you solving that from a brand perspective? Because I've heard from some RA firms that would say, hey, we work in the ultra high net worth space. And if we have a small account solution, we're diluting our brand. So do we stand up a separate business or what does that look like and how do we market to it? And then there's some businesses who do all the things and feel like they're really challenged from a marketing perspective because sometimes in essence, when you're saying we do all things for all people, you're saying you do nothing for no one. So how do you solve for that at the bank?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting conversation to have because I understand how you could easily dilute your brand by offering a lot of things to a lot of people. And I hear a lot of conversation going on in the industry about having to niche down. And I think that's fair. I think it's probably easier for a lifestyle practice to niche down and to say, we serve this segment of clients really, really well. Totally get it. You can have a profitable business doing that. As a full service financial institution, I think you can also replicate the success of niching down on inside of the same umbrella. So ultimately, it comes back to people. And I don't think people hire a brand as much as they hire the people who work inside of the brand. And so if I have a group that specializes in ultra high net worth folks, that's who they're hiring. They're not necessarily hiring the bank. And you know how marketing works too. All of our best efforts pale in comparison to the value of a great referral.
Right.
And so if you're in the right communities or in the right circles and you get known for doing a half dozen things, that's an incredible business. And I think you can do that inside of the same organization. And we've proven we've been able to do it. We've become known for giving those new investors a leg up and making sure that they're on the right path and helping them as they continue to grow with their wealth. But we're also known for serving families with really, really complex needs. And I don't think clients care about the brand, to be honest with you. I think it's additive, but that's not why they're hiring us.
Yeah, I mean, it is such a people-based business and people hire people. People want to work with people that they can trust, that they feel work with people like them. No one really wants to feel like an off the side of the desk solution, which
Right.
can happen sometimes with small accounts. So it makes sense to me that you've built this like specific dedicated small account solution with a team that services that segment directly. And I also appreciate hearing you say sort of we talk a lot about the importance of having an ideal client profile, and Michael Kitces talks a lot about the power of a niche market. On our second installment of the Organic Growth series, we had Adam Schmela from Integrated Planning and Wealth Management, who has a hyper focused ideal client profile with um, owners of optometric practices who make more than $850,000 a year in revenue. And he, to your point, he's built a really remarkable business it's a great business and it's growing really fast. I think that your point is very well made about sort of thinking about how do you elevate personal brands while still maintaining the importance of a corporate brand and making sure that there's a really nice alignment between the two. And so I'd love to get your like a deeper perspective from you on that, Adam, and I'll give you a little bit of context to help you understand sort of where my mind is at, because we believe the same thing that you believe. You've been a guest on our New School podcast more than once, so you understand our New School mindset is really around helping wealth management businesses to bring vulnerability and authenticity and really a heart-centered approach to marketing as the most powerful way to create connection and ultimately serve more clients. So we believe very much what you believe. People buy people, not brands. We also respect branding and we understand the importance of a brand. It's sort of that validation factor, trust factor. Can I do business with you? Can I trust this brand? And it does matter. But we do hear from some executive teams that we speak with, specifically when we're talking about how to help larger businesses really accelerate into their growth potential. We believe that there's huge potential in the advisor field.
Yeah.
And so we talk about how can you elevate, how can you help your advisors, give them the coaching, the resources, consulting, and peer accountability that they need to build really influential personal brands. And we get the pushback sometimes, well, I don't want them to do that. That feels dangerous. That feels like I won't have the ability to wrap my arms around it from a compliance perspective. That feels like there's not going to be cohesion in what we're saying in the market. So that's sort of why I want to dig a little bit deeper on this topic, because I think that it's a huge potential for firms when done right. And you've been able to do it right.
Well, I think it's I think it's interesting that people feel that way because we don't have to look very far for examples of firms that have done this incredibly successfully for decades. And I'm thinking mostly of the wirehouses. So I don't think most clients of Merrill Lynch are there because of Merrill Lynch. They're there because of their person happens to work at Merrill Lynch. And Merrill Lynch still has a corporate brand and it stands for something, just like all the other wirehouses do or large financial institutions. But they're really built upon the production and the relationships that individuals or teams can create within that brand. So to say that it's not possible, I think, is misguided. There is a risk, though, and the wirehouses will tell you this, as will any business. When you put your growth trajectory on the backs of individual people inside of your brand, you damn well better keep them because if they take their clients or they take what they have built and go somewhere else, that is a significant risk to your business. But I think the risk of doing the alternative is far greater. It's having people who can't grow your business, who don't have a desire to grow your business, who aren't invested in what you're doing and rely purely on corporate branding to get new clients in the door. I don't see that happening very often. I think especially the bigger you get, it's so difficult for a corporate brand to be known for something. And you think about wealth management, most of us are doing the exact same thing for basically the exact same cost. Let's use Sioux Falls as an example. Sioux Falls is in the surrounding area. Let's say there's 300,000 people in the area. Yeah, inside of that area, there's more than 100 trust companies. There's a lot of the wirehouses are here. retail brokerage is here, RIAs are here, insurance companies are here. And so there is no shortage of competition. And so for any one single brand on its own to be able to take over a market and grow outside of what you need to grow in order to even just stay relevant, I think is really, really difficult. So you have to rely on your people. And that's where it can get tough, when, especially when you turn on the camera and you turn on the microphone and you let your people go. I understand the compliance risk and some of the danger that can come from that, but I also think that can be well managed through a corporate strategy that allows for the freedom for your individual folks to go build their business to help elevate yours.
Yes. You know what I
Correct,
was,
right?
yes. You know what I was thinking when you were talking about Merrill Lynch, just as that like hypothetical example? Could you imagine if they took the handcuffs, if the wirehouse community took the handcuffs off their advisors and actually allowed them to market? Could you imagine?
Game over.
Because to your point, I think that the wirehouses do have an advantage. I don't know the size of the advantage, but there is a prestige and an exclusivity that comes with some of those brand names, whether it's Merrill or Morgan or Goldman or whomever. And I think that there is I think that there is an advantage. I don't know, I don't have the data on how big it is, but I don't think that it's so big that it outweighs personal relationships. Like absolutely not. And from my perspective, those wirehouse advisors are so handicapped in their ability to market because think about it, they have to the corporate structure, the compliance teams have to really manage to the lowest common denominator
Yep.
because of the size and scale of those businesses. And so they're not allowed to oftentimes be really active on social media or to develop, microsites within the larger sites and really have a fully thought out and fleshed out content strategy, podcasts, YouTube, those types of things. So it is kind of interesting to think about what if, right?
Yep.
I think it's a good it should be a good accelerant to people in and around the independent wealth management space to really think about why it's so important to have to take advantage of what you can do
Yep.
where others can't, which you've done very well with your Common Sense on the Prairie podcast. So I want to switch gears a little bit. You've already given us in this conversation, Adam, like a really good understanding of how you've built the foundation to actually have the growth that you've experienced and how you've thought through service offerings and an expanded service offering to meet the needs of clients and really and also in a way that is very forward thinking. So how are we not just achieving growth now, but how are we making sure that we're achieving growth in the future? Sort of thinking through your small accounts division and some of the other moves that you've made. I know that you've also done a lot from a marketing perspective to help to drive towards growth. And one of those things is your podcast. So tell me a little bit about that journey from like, why did you start the podcast? And I'm sure I'll have more questions because I want to know all the things, why you started it, what was the original impact, what's the impact today? Sort of talk us through that journey.
Yes. So the podcast has it's been an interesting journey. So it's a little over 4 years I've been doing it. I had the idea to do it 5 years ago. And it basically came to me because I was watching a commercial from a large financial services provider giving what I thought to be really, really terrible advice. And so I was yelling at my TV like a lunatic. And I thought, even if I can't change a lot of hearts and minds on a big scale, I want to try to do something. So my goal was to put good information out into the world. And so I started the podcast with the idea that I would talk about really technical things because that's what people like me who are raised in technical topics are comfortable talking about. And so I started doing the show, and I was talking to my wife, and I said, "God, this is uninspiring. I'm not super into this." And she actually said, maybe if you loosened up, you might enjoy it a little more. And so I was like, "Great idea. Why don't you come on the show, and we'll talk to people about our money journey?" And I don't know why I said that. I don't know where that idea came from. But so she and I went on and we talked about some of the issues that we have had to work through, namely me bringing a ton of student loans in the marriage and kind of some of the scars that those things leave. And so what has happened with the show is it's taken on a different form than I thought it would originally. We still talk to national experts to bring that level of expertise to our audience, to our clients. We talk to my internal team members because I think it's important to highlight our expertise. But the episodes we could probably get the most feedback on, and the ones I enjoy the most, are just when we talk to people about how they've handled money and some of their wins and losses and how they've struggled, and you see the real emotion. And so, what that has done, I think, for our business has been a couple things. Number one, people who see the show and they see our content feel like they already know us before they've ever met us. So, from a business standpoint, when they come in for the first time, it's more of, are you who you seem to be when I've checked you out? And so our sales cycle has reduced dramatically, which is great. So business kind of objectives met. The other thing that's been interesting to me is how it's changed the level of conversation we have with our clients and our prospects. They almost come in expecting the same level of conversation that we're having on the
Mm.
podcast. And so rather than us talking about, well, if you see here, we beat the benchmark in these following years, we're not talking about that stuff. We are talking about how you were raised with money, how your family deals with money, what you want in your future beyond just vision and goals and risk tolerance stuff. I think that a lot of people do use to check the box. We have real conversations and we eventually get to the business stuff. And so that has really been transformational, but it's also a little scary from a business perspective. And so I think I need to talk about that too. What we have to do is we really have to retrain ourselves in skills that we didn't all have. So we all went to law school or were CPAs or went through investment training, things like that. We didn't necessarily get trained on how to deal with a couple who calls you on speakerphone as they're arguing. And so we're now having to double back and saying, okay, people are expecting different things from us, and that's good, that's healthy, but we also need to be equipped to have those conversations in a productive way and to translate that into a meaningful business. And so that was unexpected, but it's good. And part of my personal mission is to change the way wealth management services are delivered. And I feel like I can do that in a large way through the podcast and changing the conversations around money.
How do you approach that sort of helping people within your department change their approach to service? And then that's a big shift.
It is a big shift. But I'll take a step back a little bit too, because I think this has broader implications for our industry. Our industry was built on the backs of salespeople, people who smile and dial for dollars. You got a phone book or a call list and say, this is how you're going to build your business and figure it out or 2 years or less or get out. And so we don't hire for those people generally anymore. And we hire for people who are really, really adept at service and have that service mindset. And so it's not as hard for us to change as it might be for someone else who doesn't hire for that level of care and service. So the people we've always tended to hire have been people who care a lot and who are very personally invested in client outcomes. And so getting buy-in from them to change maybe the frame of how we approach conversations and some of the things we talk about has not been as difficult as I was thinking it was going to be. We're doing something now. We've created an internal training program that is really, really exciting. And it gets to this very thing of how do we so if we have 45 people, I think we have 43 introverts. Okay. So we've tried to kind of create this, what I call a blueprint for growth for introverts, which is basically starts with the premise of why do we need to grow as a firm? And I think we'll probably talk about some of those economic headwinds that we have to deal with. Why do we have to grow? Why do people hire us in the first place? And why do they keep us? And then where's the value that we can add? And part of that value we can add is asking questions that no one else is willing to ask. And that's the fun and exciting pivot that we're making in our business. And I think will continue to put us on a very, very aggressive growth trajectory because I don't know that many other firms are willing to go there.
Well, and hearing you talk about how you hire for people who have a tremendous amount of care and bring that service orientation, made me think about a lot of what we hear in the industry today, which is the rainmakers, those, the founders of the business, to your point, people who are really good sales professionals. They're looking around and saying, well, the next generation of advisors just, they don't do what I do. Like, this is what I did. Why won't they just do it? And I don't know if it's because they haven't been specific in hiring for specific roles, or if they haven't implemented training, but it does feel like there's this generational gap between, what worked to get us here is not going to be what works to get us there. And we're not really quite sure sort of how to cross that divide. So when you have a team of introverts who really care and have a high service orientation, it leads me to think that you don't have a high number of people who are highly inclined towards sales. So how do you how do you fill that gap?
Yeah. So the way I look at it, it's kind of a multi-step process. The first is you have to have a brand that stands for something. And part of that for us is personal branding. We have a great corporate brand, but I think there's real magic when you can marry a strong corporate brand with really strong individual brands. Um, so you start there. Then you have to have really good people who care. You have to have products and services that people value and are willing to pay for. And then if you don't have a legion of salespeople, you have to really build an ecosystem around your service culture to create a system that brings in as many leads as possible that we can then love on and take care of. And the way we've done that has been primarily through two things. Number one is client experience. Like we want to create a client experience so good that our clients can't help but tell everyone they know about it. So that's a high standard. And we're always striving to find new ways of trying to do those things. So we get client referrals. If you looked back 5 years, Meg, on our firm, the percentage of our new business that came from our current clients was negligible. Last year, it was more than 50%. And I anticipate that will continue to grow. And I think people wring their hands a lot in our industry, like, oh my gosh, all of my new business is coming from my clients. To that, I say, great. That's a good thing. That means your clients care enough about you and your success and what you're doing and see the value in it that they're willing to put their neck out there to refer you. That's awesome. I think where people come into trouble is that's the only thing. That's the
Right.
only tool that they have. And so we look at kind of 5 channels that we use to grow our business, and digital is a big one of them because if we do content really, really well and we lead with giving, I think that that will come back to us. And I don't think it's any coincidence that when we started blogging and the our content push and the podcast 4 years ago, I don't think it's a coincidence that our massive growth has happened at the same time. You can't, it's hard, like all marketing, it's really, really difficult to tie it back directly, but I don't think it's a coincidence.
So to your point about referrals, it is the gold standard of success to have a client who believes so much in the relationship that they're willing to make an introduction. And of course, yes, if you're getting referrals, of course you want to be getting more referrals. I think to your point, the issue is when it's your only channel for growth. And I think coupled with that is across the industry, many advisors are seeing their percentage of new business that comes in from referrals declining.
Mm,
And I think that it's multifactored. I think that there's part of it, you talked a lot about how much work and effort you've and that your team have put into building a superior client experience that really is it's you have an internal ecosystem, but you also have this external ecosystem that's just creating a really easy way for people to want to give referrals. I do wonder, and FICOM has some research that's coming out on this later in the second quarter of 24, which is where we are right now. We have some research coming out around from a generational perspective, people's propensity to seek referrals
mm,
when looking for financial advisors. And the data is fairly striking around age 60 and over. 60% of those people surveyed, and these are people who already have a financial advisor, they selected their financial, they required a referral for
mm.
that selection. When you get below 60, so 44 to 60, it's less than half of that. And below 44, it's even less. And so, what that shows us is that digital marketing plays a much bigger role in growth than I think our industry is paying attention to. Um, and so I want to dive into that a little bit because to your point, digital marketing is one of your sort of growth channels, and I know how much you and your team do to make sure that you're at the right place at the right time in front of the right person with your content strategy to make sure that people know about you, are getting to know about you digitally, and are ultimately coming in with a really high degree of confidence that you're probably the advisor that they want to work with. So tell us about what you and your team are doing from a digital marketing perspective. You've spoken about the podcast, which is I'm sure is a huge piece of it. What else is there?
Yeah. So for us, it really, you're right. It starts with the podcast. So from the podcast, we get audio, we get video, because I'm one of those introverts, by the way. So and you suggested we do video and personalize this and create that connection. It was a great suggestion. And then we can cut those things up. We can put them on social. We can include them in email blasts. So we do quarterly blasts summarizing our content and other interesting content that we've seen around the landscape, whether it's a Wall Street Journal article or a chart that we saw. So not only do we serve up our content, we also try to find other content that's worthwhile. So we've got the podcast and that ecosystem. And then we also are doing blogging now. And from a business perspective, I don't think it's healthy for our brand to be reliant on one person. And in large part that one person has been me, which, is working, which is fine. But I think from a business continuity perspective, if something were to happen to me, that's not healthy for the First National Bank in Sioux Falls to be so reliant just upon Adam. And so we have a team now who have raised their hands who are willing to do some writing for us. So we're doing monthly blogs and we're putting their names and faces on there. We're starting to do more video content with our other advisors and show what it is we do and who we work with. And so what you see on our website today will be different than what you'll see 12 months from now. And a large part of that is just around digitally creating a community and showing people who we are, and so they can self-select and choose to work with us.
And have you had to build out a huge marketing team to support sort of the growth in your efforts?
Um, no, but my caveat is, so we worked with your firm and you guys were incredibly helpful you talked about taking a step back and looking at the business as a whole. One of the things that you and your team really helped us with was figuring out who our ideal clients are and what do they want to hear from us and how. So once we did that and really drilled down there, I think we were able to amplify our efforts. But we're one part of a larger financial organization. So we have a marketing team that supports the entire bank. The good news is we have a marketing team that supports the entire bank. The bad news is we have a marketing team that supports the entire bank. And so we're just one part. And so we can only expect, or in my case, demand so much time and effort from them. Now, the nice thing has been, I'm biased, of course, but I think we're doing some of the most fun and innovative, cutting edge marketing work. And so they've been willing to jump in and figure things out with us, which has been great. But then about 18 months ago, I decided I needed to add a leadership role on my team within wealth management. So brought on an individual who can help just focus our efforts just on wealth management marketing and in particular the digital experience and what we're doing from a brand perspective and getting our names and our faces and our content out at the right cadence in front of the right people. And that's been really, really helpful. And it's been good for me too. And I want to give credit to the rest of my leadership team. When we went through strategic planning, one of the, we have green, yellow, red as far as things. And one of the reds was my time
Mm.
and just not being able to do it all. And one of the things that they challenged me on was to give up some of the marketing, which I'm not a marketer by trade. Everything that I have done have been just ideas that I've borrowed from other people, from folks like you, from other people around the industry who I think are doing it really well, and frankly, other industries. If you look at a lot of things that we do, it's from the hospitality industry. whether it's the drink menu we have up front or how we treat clients, how we bring them along through their journey with us. We're not looking at other wealth management firms for advice there. So it's been become a passion of mine. So I would say I have given it up ish because I really like it and I feel really creative and inspired there. And I don't want to just look at numbers all day. And so Mike has been a great thought partner for me to be able to help me get my ideas out there and then execute on them.
Well, you're a very natural marketer. I think it just, you and I have
Thank
talked a
you.
lot about your belief in marketing, which wasn't always there. And I think that you still don't believe in a lot of the traditional sort of marketing tropes. And to
Right.
your point, looking outside the industry, but it comes very natural. Maybe I'll say definitely a natural marketer, but I think you're really a remarkable growth leader. I think you just have a growth mindset that's led to so much of the success of your department within the bank. You talked about five growth channels, so one of them being client referrals, another being your digital marketing efforts. We know that you don't have custodial referral programs. So what are the other three channels?
So while we don't have the custodial referrals, we do have a bank that we're associated with or we're part of. And so we have bank referrals. So we spend quite a bit of time with bank partners talking about their customers and how we may be able to help. And we've come a really, really long way there. And so that's a large driver of our growth now, which is good. I mean, it's a lot easier to have someone add one more thing um, rather than start over with a new financial institution. So we try to lean pretty heavy on that. The other is COIs. Um, and the issue I had, I think if you went back 8 years ago, a lot of our growth was coming from COIs. And COIs can be a really effective growth channel if you do it well. But in such a crowded marketplace, I just am uncomfortable having all of my chips in the middle of the table and asking someone else to grow my business for me. Maybe that's me being a control freak. Now, I think we can be incredible partners and work together with COIs to grow our business, but I'm just uncomfortable with the idea that we're going to wait for someone else to grow our business. So we still get a lot of COI referrals, but it's no longer the main way we grow our business. And the last is just our own personal networks, our family, our
Mm-hmm.
friends, the people we bump into at the park, the organizations we're involved in the community. This bank is an incredible asset to the community, and so just leveraging that and making introductions is another way we're growing.
And I think the important takeaway here is just the diversified growth strategies that you implement. I think I had a great conversation with Jeff Deco, who's the CEO of Wealth Enhancement Group.
Mm.
And Jeff has a really interesting prior to Wealth Enhancement Group consumer packaged goods CPG background. So he's a really strong consumer marketer, has a really strong consumer marketing background, and we were talking about what's working, what's not working. And this was the beginning, or no, this was in the middle of 2023. He was telling me about how events had become a big driver of new leads for Wealth Enhancement Group. And we were joking a little bit about how it was sort of like the revenge travel coming out of COVID. Like people want to be
Yes.
back, in person. And he said to me, he said, well, it's not really about events. It's just about what works at the right time. Anything works, everything works. It's about what's going to work for your business at that time and being open and flexible, watching, iterating, evolving as needed, and not being overly reliant on one specific growth channel. And so to sort of hear you go through those five growth channels, from clients to digital to bank to centers of influence to personal networks, and know that you're pushing on all of those probably in different ways and at different times, but that you have access to it. I mean, to me, that's the big takeaway. I think it's having diversified growth channels, having strategy around each, understanding what's working, why, and what needs to be shifted based on what you're seeing, because consumer needs are going to continue to change. Consumer preferences will continue to change. The industry will continue to evolve. And so this is sort of it's a constant journey. It's not a destination that any of us are seeking to get to. And I think back to some of the data I was sharing from the consumer survey that we did around generational preferences and how people are seeking and hiring financial advisors. I think that's just sort of the next thing for growth leaders like yourself to be cognizant of and aware of. But because you've got the diversified channels, if you do see that client referrals are no longer growing in the way that they have for the last 4 years, it's not going to be difficult for you and your team to understand, well, this went from this percentage down to this percentage. How are we going to fill that gap?
Yep. And we have to fill that gap. You mentioned some of the numbers earlier. This industry has a giant math problem that no one's talking about. So if the industry is growing sub 3% and expenses are growing by 7% or more, we have to find ways to continue to grow. I mean, I think about our business. One of the challenges that we have that we've identified several years ago and are racing to get out in front of is the fact that I mentioned before, we have a large number of clients who are getting trust services from us. Well, those clients are generally going to be older, and so the numbers of our clients that are passing away continues to increase every year, and they're spending their money as they should. Like that's why we save is to be able to live on our money. But from a business perspective, if you've got a giant part of your book that is spending their money down and you can't invest it in growth because they need the money and then they're passing it away, like that has exacerbated the economics for us. And so we saw that a few years ago and we thought we need to get younger real quick and we need to find accumulators. And so even if that means investing a little bit more now um, to get that reward later, that's what we're going to do. And so every year when we start off the year, we're in probably a 12% hole. And just to get even. So if our expenses are going up by 7% and we also have 5% plus spend or distributions because of death, that's a that's a big number just to break even from the year before. And so double digit growth, that's a table starter. That's just to maintain profitability. So for us to be able to hit that bogey and exceed it, we have to do really innovative things and we have to do it in a diversified way. And we can't put ourselves in a position where one change is going to jeopardize our whole business. And so I always, people, when they meet me, I think they probably think I'm pretty intense, but a lot of that is just an urgency because I tend to live at least 3 years in the future and I just want everyone else to get there with me. And one of the things that I know to be true is we're going to have significant challenges in our industry keeping up with expense growth and distribution rates. And so we need to have systems and processes in place to grow our businesses because inorganic growth isn't a cure-all. I know that's what everyone talks about, and that's what get all the headlines. And that's really expensive right now, also, by the way. So buying growth worked a few years ago. Now, sometimes these firms are cobbling together firms that couldn't grow themselves. So how are you going to grow? You have to have that mindset across your firm to have growth. If inorganic works, and sometimes that's incredibly additive, that's awesome. But you also have to grow organically because the math is going to force you to.
Well, I mean, I don't think I can think of another question. That was so beautifully wrapped up with sort of your whole mindset and philosophy around growth and why it is so important in this industry for firms to be thinking in new and differentiated ways about organic growth specifically and how to overcome that deficit that you laid out really nicely between decumulation, clients passing away, increasing expenses. It's a huge need. And I think to our earlier conversation around what if the Merrill Lynches of the world allowed their advisors to start marketing. I mean, the large global financial institutions that have a really strong wealth management presence in the US, they're doing what you're doing at the bank. And they're investing in those accumulators, the younger savers, the profile of clients that most RIA firms today are not paying attention to. And so I think that's why your story and your mindset and philosophy are so important for the industry because I think that you are building a highly differentiated growth business and the success speaks for itself just with the numbers and that you've shared and some more numbers around sort of how the wealth management department specifically is growing in comparison to some of the other channels at the bank. Your success really speaks for itself. So Thank you so much, Adam, for being here and sharing all of your insights with us. If one of our followers and listeners would like to reach out and ask for more information, where can they find you?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is through LinkedIn. So just type in Adam Cox, and if it has a face like mine, you probably found the right person. So feel free to contact me and reach out anytime. I love talking about
Awesome.
this stuff. As you can tell, it's a passion of mine, and I love helping others in the industry. And one of the reasons why I was excited about this opportunity is, you know, I hope to be able to prove that if a community bank trust department in Sioux Falls, South Dakota can do this stuff, that anybody can do this stuff. And so if people have questions about that, I'm always happy to chime into the conversation.
Thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate you. And thank you to everyone listening.